Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 19th of June and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 33, season 7 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. And once again, we've gathered together this week's big car retailing stories across both the franchised and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place on demand on your podcast feed.
So we've got some shout-outs this week, haven't we? And we've obviously got the special memorable moments as well this week, Curtis.
We have indeed, yeah. So the first shout out goes to our good friend Alan at JA Autos, who, following last week's show, because the AM finally last week was all about these non-classic cars which have become sought after and gone up in price, including the Hillman Imp. So Alan said he's now looking out for an electric Hillman Imp for us. So we may well fight over that, Phil.
Yeah, there is businesses out there, and I have seen one or two. I think there's a couple that are on TV actually that do actually convert the older vehicles into electric vehicles. So
I've seen the older Mini converted, and that seems to work really, really well.
So they're taking, accident damaged vehicles, whether that's a Nissan Leaf or a Tesla, and taking that technology and putting it into either an E-Type Jag or the Hillman Imps. Why not? It's the way it's probably going to go with some of these classic cars, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, and it would work so well in a Hillman Imp. That's the perfect car.
0 to 60 in about 4 seconds.
Yes,
with a Tesla engine in it. Yeah, that'd be an interesting one, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so, and also if you'd like to come on the show or have any news or press releases to share, then just message Phil and I on LinkedIn or Twitter, or email us at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
So we've got, this week we are joined by Stephen Whitton for his regular Memorable Moments slot. And he's going to be providing an update on mental health well-being in the motor trade, and it did go down well last time, didn't it? Because it is a very, very sensitive subject, but one that is everybody's talking about within the sector at the minute. And I think we've had, is it Wellbeing Week recently or something? I think
yes,
there's been something.
Yes.
And I know, speaking to Steve earlier on this week, he's very busy at the minute, having lots of conversations across the sector with many of his patrons and those that have actually got involved with what he's doing. So we have got that just after the midway break today. So do please stay tuned for that as well.
And we've also got a teaser alert, which is basically watch out for a big name interview that we're due to do. We're due to record it hopefully next week, and it's with a former OEM boss turned retailer. But we can't say any more, just in case it doesn't happen. But I'm sure it will, and we're all prepared for that. And that's going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, this is a name of the industry.
Yeah,
both. In terms of his leadership and his role, and in the social space as well. So as you say, Curtis, watch out for that one. It's a great one.
Yep. So headlines this week: expert warns parts crisis could hamper new car production well into next year, and we'll find out exactly who that expert is in a minute. CarWow snaps up used car platform Wizzle to create all-in-one online buying and selling service. Motorpoint medium-term strategy targets near trebling of revenues to £2 billion. Prices for new cars rising 5 times as fast as wages. UK in talks to build gigafactories for electric cars. And finally this week, we'll take a deep dive into the agency model. So it's a story that we flagged up last week, and it'll be from AM, and it's agency model retail could free up car dealers to pursue used car growth. So the first story this week, as I say, it's from AM Online, and it's expert warns parts crisis could hamper new car production well into next year. Now, I can reveal this expert is no other than yourself, Phil.
Thanks for that, Curtis. Yes,
You've been quoted. You've been quoted in an AM headline
as the expert. Yes,
as an expert. Sorry, car dealer. This is from Car Dealer. This one.
Yes, yeah. So as you say, I mean, yeah. Thanks for that, Curtis. But they'll expect me to share some real insight now. No, I think
go for it.
No, I think the whole point of this is and we've spoke about it numerous times on the podcast and. There was this week a VRA webinar where we had David Bailey on that webinar talking about the challenges within that OEM sector at the minute around the shortage of supply, the impact from the semiconductor, the plastic, the aluminium, the steel prices, etc., and what's happening in that marketplace. And the reports are, and the sentiment is that this actually could get worse in the second half of the year than what we've seen already in the first half of the year. So, we know that there's been products on the ground. Manufacturers have been trying to work through physical or imminent product through the sector. There's been reports that some of the manufacturers are switching production to either cars or CV, depending which is the easier or more efficient one to build. And in some cases, whether they build the more premium product because it is more profitable for the OEM and therefore utilising supply to make that product, and which country they supply as well, whether they make those vehicles for a right-hand drive market or a left-hand drive market, and where the demand is. So there's a lot going on in that manufacturer space at the minute, which, as we know, is having a significant hit on the used vehicle market following supply, because one, you've got the impact of the pandemic last year with shortage of products, but now you've got the market starting to switch from new cars into used cars and therefore creating competition in the used car space.
Yeah, and we talk about this on a regular basis. There is huge competition in the used car space, and this is driving even more competition potentially. And it's probably also worth highlighting because semiconductors, the shortage of the semiconductors is a big part of this issue. And we had Dash on a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that as an industry, we're behind Apple in the queue for semiconductors. Yes. And it just shows that the pecking order. So this has got a long way to play out. So I think these warnings are really sort of appropriate at the moment to just flag up what's happening in the short to medium term.
Yeah, and it's a consequence of the market, a consequence of the industry as well. That we have always worked on a just in time. So throughout the pandemic, where we weren't high on production and the factories were shut down and the consumer market was continuing, the tier 1, tier 2 suppliers turned their focus towards the consumer demand for the electronics. And at the same time, cars of today require additional technology and electronics to support the functionality within the vehicles.
Yeah.
And there's even reports where manufacturers are now reverting back to analog displays from digital displays, because those are easier to get supply for than the digital technology of today. So there's a lot going on in that market. And to be fair, the manufacturers are trying to do workarounds to ensure that production continues and they still get product to market. But again, it isn't a short-term fix, and that's the warning that's coming out at the minute. Even with Bosch, building a factory to make semiconductors, it ain't going to be done overnight. These things do take time, unfortunately.
And it's interesting what you say about going back to analog, because in many ways the analog displays were actually a lot easier to use. The onboard computers now are pretty complex, and certainly in my previous life as a motoring journalist, getting in and out of different cars all the time, and the systems, the onboard systems, were all totally different. Some were easy to use, some were less easy to use, and less intuitive. So that's going to be interesting to see how that one
Yeah,
plays
yeah,
out.
and the coding. These microchips of
Yeah.
years ago, the coding were 100,000 codes within the microchip. Now it's millions to do the same, to do all the new stuff within the vehicles and the connectivity and electronics within today's vehicle and EVs. Is drawing on that even further. So again, one that is going to go on for some time. But what we're trying to call out is what impact that's having, and some of the data within that report. It talks about obviously the demand and the pressure on used cars, and we will get Darren Martin on again this month to talk about that strength of the used car market. But the vehicles going through the wholesale market are getting older and higher mileage now because the cars aren't either coming off contract hire leasing because they can't replace them with new cars, or the retailers are keeping more products to try and keep the stock levels high as possible.
We will return to more
We
used
will.
car stories this week. In fact, next, also from Car Dealer, the headline there is CarWow snaps up used car platform Wizzle to create all-in-one online buying and selling service. So yeah, this is CarWow. They've acquired Wizzle. We don't know how much for, but it was announced during the week. And so the Wizzle platform, for those who are unfamiliar with it, it was launched, I don't know, probably,
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago, something like that,
Yeah.
maybe a little longer ago. But it basically provides a service for car owners to go on to and sell their car to a dealer. And I think up until now that they've only been able to do it with possibly one dealer. They'll get an offer from one dealer, but with CarWow on board, it'll open it up to multiple providers. Now, CarWow already had a sell your car feature on its platform, but this will see it vastly expanded, and they're launching it initially in UK and then Germany and Spain.
Yeah, and as you say there, the platform was established by Sebastian Deval, and back in 2012, and they've now sort of had more than 2,000 dealers using the platform. So again, like you say, this added value to Carwow's proposition and that European market that they are obviously, as you say there, Curtis, looking at Germany and Spain as that growth aspirations for the product as well. And I think it's already changed, hasn't it? I think it's already got the new branding
It
on
has.
the platform.
Yeah, it's Wizzle from CarWow. They branded that immediately, and the deal went through.
So a lot going on within Carwow, and there is an interview there with the owner with James Hind. Good interview there, and sort of talks through some of that tech business world that he operates within and the growth of the business and etc. So worth having a look at that press release and that interview if you do get the chance.
So heading over to AM Online, and the headline there is Motorpoint medium-term strategy targets near trebling of revenues to £2 billion. So this is it's a very detailed story actually from AM, and it's a story of two halves because it starts off with Motorpoint's results. So for the 12 months to March the 31st, revenues were down 29.1% to 721.4 million. So this is very much in that sort of COVID hit period. That's the 12 months, prior to the end of March. So profit before tax was down 48.4% from 18.8 million in 2019 to 9.7 million this year, as gross margin improved from 7.8% to 8.7%. And during that period, the group sold around 68,000 vehicles.
Yeah, and as you say there, they obviously focusing on one, the financial results of what they've done and the chief executive, Mark Carpenter, they talk about being paid national minimum wage for a period of months, along with their senior leadership, where they were taking pay cuts to help manage that financial part of the business through that sort of tough times of the early lockdown. But like, as you say, Curtis, this is a story of two halves, because then they talk about their growth aspirations and investment plans, and that is one serious growth plan, isn't it, for Rivera?
It is, yeah, and it's sort of captured in the headline. So the Motorpoint's growth plan targets, the target is a turnover of £2 billion, with £1 billion of that earned through e-commerce. Now, a major part of this will be the rollout of 12 new sales and collection branches, which will virtually see a doubling of their footprint, because they've currently got a network of 14 sites. And of course, it will see them substantially increase their investment in marketing and e-commerce. So some bold plans there from Motorpoint.
Yeah, and as you say, we've covered a few stories recently, haven't we, with the around those supermarket businesses doing that sort of delivery, click and collect marketplace, and very much focusing on that, aren't they, with this, like you say, that the new sort of e-commerce home delivery and reserve and collect proposition to help them gain that growth. So again, I'm sure we'll keep a close eye on this one as it develops.
Yeah, you're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on Motor Trade Radio, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines, and available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed. Now, next up is Steve Whitton's Men Able Moments, Motor Trade Radio's regular look at mental health and well-being issues affecting people in the motor trade. And this week, following the sad death of someone in our sector, Steve discusses the issue of suicide and how we can all look out for and support colleagues.
Yeah, hi everyone, hope you're well. This is Steve Whitton with another Men Able Moments for Motor Trade Radio podcast. I am going to start with the really unpleasant subject of suicide, and that is because this week I couldn't help but be moved by, as anyone would of course, by hearing that an old colleague, somebody who I have to say I didn't know well, but nonetheless was a name from my past, from my career in the industry for some time, took his own life last week. So, of course, our thoughts and feelings go out to his family. None of us know really what was going on or what brought that on. But it just reminded me that seeing the thread of messages, it's really quite obvious that when these things happen, most people go around saying, well, you never saw it coming, didn't know it was going to happen. This person had everything to live for, had a happy life on the face of it, and so on. So it really just reminded me to say, a couple of things really. Let's all really be kind to everyone we meet, because you never really know what battles they're facing. And of course, the other side of that is that what do we need to do in this industry to really be a complete leading light and make sure that these things don't happen? On the last Men Able Moments, I talked through some numbers, and we concluded that it could be 146 people in the next year who take their own lives, and that's clearly 146 too many. And we want to do whatever we can to get the word out there that, look, please pick up the phone, please get in touch, please talk to somebody. It doesn't matter if that person's qualified or not, there will be people out there to listen. And at Men Able, that's what we are promoting and wanting to do, is to encourage everyone to reach out and have those conversations. Now, I'm particularly moved by that situation, not only because it's somebody that I know, and it was a surprise, of course, but also because as part of the discussion thread, there was mention in there that a few weeks ago, this particular individual had actually mentioned to a friend of his that he was aware of Men Able and of the industry's moves to embrace well-being and mental health. Now, that has really moved me, because that made me think, well, what else do we need to do? What more do we need to do to get the message out there and to encourage people to pick up the phone? And I suppose the answer to that is loads, absolutely loads. So there's a little bit of a plea in what I'm talking about today, and that is that if you are across the industry in whatever role or position or capacity you work in, let's get talking. Let's get everyone talking about this subject as something that's just every day and supporting each other and looking out for each other. Now, on the other side of that, this week I have been out and about, socially distanced, of course, with some of our Platinum members and our members, and been going around talking to them about what they're doing in their businesses. And I have to say, I'm not going to give any secrets away, but I've been blown away by some of the thoughts and ideas that people are having that are about helping their teams with their well-being. Now, some of these are really innovative stuff, but they're not stuff that is going to completely change the picture of anyone's business. And the reason I say that is because actually the positive side of embracing mental health and well-being is that actually when people feel good about themselves, they perform well. And, you know, let's really remember that the reason everyone's in business is to perform well and to make money and to secure futures and livelihoods and so on. So it really is in everyone's interest to get them talking about all the things that are impacting on that. And of course, mental health is a key one. So a few things for you to look out for over the coming weeks. And as soon as I can share some of those innovative bits, then I will. But in the meantime, as you know, you can get in touch. I'd love to have a chat with you. Just drop us a line through menable.org or join me on LinkedIn, Stephen J. Whitton. And, let's get this industry moving. I'm getting inquiries every day from some big companies around the industry. And I'm sure that before long, we are going to get this movement absolutely rocking and rolling. So, but again, let's go back over those points that, suicide is preventable, and let's not allow this to just drift away and for us to just put these statistics on the board. These are not numbers that we should be proud of, and we really should be doing what we can to help as many people across the sector. And secondly, of course, let's make sure that we're balancing all of that up with the need for performance and objectives to be met and profit to be made. So we're all about putting people before profit, but if you do that properly, the profits will look after themselves. Have a great weekend, and I will catch up with you next time.
Thanks Steve for that, and to get in touch with Steve and Menable, just head over to menable.org, or you can find Steve on LinkedIn at Stephen with a PH J Whitton. That's WHITTON, and we'll have another Menable moment in a fortnight's time. So I look forward to hearing the next stage from Stephen there.
Yeah, so heading over to the Times for our next headline, and it's prices for new cars rising 5 times as fast as wages. Yes, 5 times. So we have got some models to pick out and show you just how some of the new prices have accelerated in recent months. But this story, it's an interesting one, worth heading over to the Times to have a look at. So it's basically saying that new cars have become increasingly unaffordable, with prices rocketing up to 5 times faster than wages over the past decade. And this is according to research identified by, I think it's Moneybarn that have done this piece of research. And the study found that some car prices have more than doubled since 2011, whereas earnings have risen by 1/5 over the same period. So the rise is believed to have been driven by an increase in the use of technology, our good friend technology. We were talking about that earlier.
If they can get it.
Yeah, if they can get it, yeah. And safety features, and the switch to electric and hybrid vehicles is also believed to have pushed up production costs, which we know about, leading to an increase in prices. So what do you make of this one, Phil?
Yeah, and I think it talks about obviously the increased push people in their owners into holding onto older, more polluting cars. Possibly, we've seen a story this week come out from What Car, which highlights where they did a survey where people are switching from new into used, which is adding additional pressure onto the used car supply there. But yeah, like you say, that those prices are eye-watering. Get the words out, Phil. When you start looking at, and I think you picked this one, didn't you? The Jeep Wrangler.
Yeah.
That's gone up 117.3%. Up to 48,920, and not far behind is a 3008
Yeah.
at 37,310. Now, obviously, they are different vehicles than what they used to be. As you say there, Curtis, different technology, different safety features, probably more spec as standard on those vehicles. But again, still significant increases in prices there.
Yeah, and it is worth pointing out this is over a 10-year period. But yeah, to talk about price creep, there, I was really surprised by certainly those two models that you mentioned, and indeed the Peugeot 508, which has gone up 95.2% to £36,000. So yeah, some interesting entries in there, and well worth heading over to the Times to have a look at those.
Yeah, and like you say, comparing it there to the price, the wage rises, being 5 times more, it's you can see where that affordability and cost of ownership is key now, isn't it, going forward?
It is, yeah, and I guess we've also got to factor in the whole PCP debate, because 10 years ago PCP wasn't an issue. Some people did it. It wasn't that widely used, whereas now, who really looks at the the outright price, because everything is PCP or monthly driven.
Yeah, exactly. So heading over to The Guardian for the next story, and this is again quite an in-depth story there from The Guardian, but the header is that the UK in talks to build battery gigafactories for electric cars. Now, this does follow on to recent headlines from the podcast last week around the investment in EV charging infrastructure and technology, but again looking at the Ford, LG, Samsung amongst companies in discussions with the UK government and local authorities. And, basically they're highlighting, isn't it, that it is key for the UK to invest or have one or more gigafactories to support the EV growth.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it looks though the government's also having talks about possible investment by Nissan, as well as two efforts by smaller startups. Is it InnoBat? I'm not aware of them, and British Volt.
Yeah.
But I guess what's particularly interesting in this story is the research that it quotes from the Faraday Institution, which that's a government-backed body which suggests the UK will lose out on 100,000 jobs without these gigafactories. And that's because car makers, as we know, will be switching from ICE vehicles to EVs, and the vast majority of British automotive output at the moment is around ICE vehicles. And yeah, we've already seen how Honda's pulling out of Swindon, Ford are pulling out of engine plants. So we are losing some of that traditional capacity in terms of car production. So there has to be a switch, and that's got to be on the roadmap pretty soon, because otherwise we're just going to lose out to European investment.
Yeah, and you made a point there with Ford, and there is a sort of an example to put this in context a little bit. So they're obviously pulling that Ford is considering where to source batteries for its new Transit, for its Ford Custom van, its Transit Custom van there, and the company did stop production of cars in the UK back in 2001, but now makes engines for Transits at its Dagenham plant there,
yes,
which are then shipped to Turkey. So again, all this rules of origin that are at play now following the EU exit, the cost of vehicles that you just mentioned, we were talking about on the previous story there, that the rules of origin will risk putting up prices of vehicles in the UK depending on where the vehicle parts are sourced. And this is key. When you move into that world of electric vehicles, the battery is a significant proportion cost of that vehicle, and if that is sourced outside of the UK, you will start to see an increase in price because of the rule of origin and importing that product into the UK marketplace. So again, this is fundamental and key to the growth of electric vehicles in the UK market.
It is, yes. And finally, this week we haven't got a funny one, but it's one that we teed up last week because it's actually a really interesting piece in AM Online. And it's a deep dive into the agency model, which is something that we seem to be talking about on a regular basis there. So if you're looking for some weekend reading, we can recommend you have a look at this story. The headline is "Agency Model Retail Could Free Up Car Dealers to Pursue Used Car Growth." So back to used cars again, and this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because only last week we were reporting from ASC on how dealer profitability in April seemed to show the first indications of the impact of agency model, because turnover across the piece was down, but profitability was up. So, and in previous weeks, we reported on how Stellantis has terminated its UK network. So that covers, Peugeot, Citroën, Vauxhall, DS, Jeep, and the Fiat brands. So new contracts will be issued in 2 years' time. But the implication is that they are looking at agency model, as a replacement to the current setup.
Yeah, and I think there's a few areas in here that as I say, it looks like the weather might be turning for this weekend, so maybe it is the time to, when the football's finished, put the pint down and have a read of this, because it is definitely changing the landscape for the automotive sector, not just in the UK but across Europe and the international markets as well as the OEMs look to increase their relationship with consumers. Part of this will be around the EV as well, around the way that EV is owned and looked after, and that relationship between the OEM and the consumer. And as you say there's a lot of conversations taking place, and it's not suitable for all manufacturers. That's key. Some manufacturers are better positioned financially to do this than others. They have a stronger network in certain territories than others. But I think what is clear, and whether it is with some of the VW businesses in UK and Europe, you cite there with Stellantis, there's a lot of manufacturers now talking about agency or distribution model and how that will look going forward. And as you say, we've had people like Steve Young on the podcast talking about it. Dash as being fairly vocal about it, and it is now a weekly conversation in the media, in some form or another. So again, the landscape is changing. How it will look, how the dealers will react to it, is fundamental now with this. And I think a lot of the conversations taking place are around the investment sector as well, that they understand it and how it works and what that means for the automotive sector, particularly in the UK, will look. But yeah, there's definitely disruption on its way, and we'll see what that landscape looks like, I think, Curtis, won't we?
Yeah, and one of the interesting points raised by Tom Seymour, who wrote the piece at AM Online, is what happens to the part exchange as part of the agency model, and also will the dealer, the participating dealer, have first dibs of that part exchange? And that's one of the many unanswered questions at the moment.
And I'm not sure there is a single answer to any of them, because I think the view that I've got and the conversations I've had is it's not black and white. I think there is going to be this blend. There's going to be a hybrid of agency. Because, like you say, some manufacturers will want to do things a certain way. They'll have better capacity, better infrastructure, better position financially than others. There is still this relationship. I think one thing that has been clear from a lot of the statements coming out from many of the global OEMs is that they still want a relationship with the dealer. There is still the need for a dealer in this model. Now, whether that is around the part exchanges, purely for the used cars, the handover collection, whatever that is, there is still a place for the dealer within the agency modelling sector. So they are fairly clear with that. This isn't about replacing dealers. It's just a different way of working for many of the dealers.
Yeah, and that's a point that's picked up by Phil Jones, head of eBay Motors Group, in the piece, as well as you. You're quoted in this one as well, Phil.
Yes, everywhere. I must be an expert or something.
Yeah, well, you must be. Yeah, you've had a busy old week, haven't you?
It has been a busy week. Yeah, but no, I think you're right. I think this is one that I think there's a lot of answers still to come. I'm not sure the OEMs have got all the answers yet. I know they are working on it. It's been muted for some time that this is something that the OEMs do want. There is examples in other markets where it's currently operating, or where an OEM has tried it and then exited successfully or unsuccessfully. So there's a lot happening, but it's certainly gathering pace now.
Yes.
And a lot of conversations. So I'm sure we'll keep picking up on this as we hear more things about it, and we'll probably try and get other experts on the podcast to try and talk through what their views are on it and what they believe will happen and when it will happen. So we'll try and keep you informed as best we can on this sector.
But that's all for now. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Thanks for joining us for all the chat that matters. We're back next weekend with our take on the latest car retailing headlines from across the media. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.